Hi, my name's Justin Shelf and I'm the engineering lead at PatchMyPC. We develop a third-party patch management solution that integrates into Microsoft Configuration Manager. Prior to my current role, I was also a Premier Field Engineer at Microsoft supporting Config Manager. In this video, I'm going to be talking about code management, how to set it up, and some of the benefits that it's going to give you. So first, for those of you who aren't that familiar with what code management is, it's essentially a way that you can manage a device with both the Config Manager client as well as the Intune agent that's going to be doing MDM capabilities. So some of the benefits that's going to get you are some of the MDM actions that you can do through Intune that you can't do through ConfigMan, things like resets, deleting devices, selective wipe, etc. So just a few things that you're going to get right away. For things that do overlap, you're going to choose whether you want Config Manager or Intune to handle those type of capabilities, and we'll go through this process. So the scenarios that I plan to cover today, I'm going to cover the ability to enroll a device into Azure AD only or a cloud domain join, how you can enroll that and auto-enroll into Intune, and then within Intune, we can deploy the Config Manager client through Cloud Management Gateway to essentially get it enrolled, co-managed with Intune and Config Manager. The second scenario we're going to talk about is if you have devices that are on-prem, domain joined only, and managed through Config Manager, how we can register those into Hybrid Azure AD, auto-enroll them into Intune, and then they could then be co-managed with Config Manager and Intune in your on-prem environment if that's where you're at today. So with that said, we'll go ahead and jump right in. There is a lot of content here, so I want to make sure that we go through and get this all covered. So the first thing I want to show is some of these settings that I have in Azure AD. So within Azure AD, under my, within here, we're at Azure AD, then we're at devices and then device settings under Azure AD. Now within the device settings, what we've done, we made sure that we're allowing users that are a user of Azure AD either through Azure AD Connect if they're on-prem identities or if they're cloud only. We're saying that any of those users have the ability to enroll devices into Azure AD. Now, the next prerequisite that we made sure that we had is back in Azure AD. So if I come back here, under Mobility, MDM, and MAM, under Microsoft Intune, what we've done, we've made sure that the users can also enroll into MDM. So I've done that in the Intune, and I also in the Intune enrollment, I also set it here. I'm not sure if you really need to duplicate that, but I do have it set in both places. All right, so I think that looks good. The only other thing I'll cover, one of my identities here, I have the trial of Intune. So within my user account, if I look at licenses, we have provided the enterprise mobility and security, and as well as Intune. So I think this one should cover both options, but I think I had Intune set first, and then I did the trial of enterprise mobility and security E5. So you will want to make sure that if you're doing the cloud scenario where you're enrolling into Azure AD with auto-MDM, that your user does also have your license assigned. All right, I think that's most of what I wanted to show from the prerequisite side from Azure and Intune in order to get this all to work. The next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and jump over to ConfigMan. Now, before we talk about the scenario where we enroll into Azure AD through the cloud, auto-enroll in Intune, and then install the Config Manager client through CMG, I do want to cover some of the prerequisites because some of these are covered in a different video. So what we've done, I'll include a video link somewhere in the top corner of the video, right where this red line is. Now, we do need Cloud Management Gateway, so that's going to allow your clients on the internet, in this scenario that enroll into Azure and Intune, to download the client and register with the Config Manager environment over the internet through CMG. So this topic is covered in another video. It's about 45 minutes, so I think it made sense to split these up. But just looking at the prerequisites for this, we will need Cloud Management Gateway, Cloud DP, which is now integrated into the Cloud Management Gateway role. and creating all the Azure AD subscriptions. So this is all done in the previous video, so you will want to start there if you want to do the scenario that we're talking about first, where we enroll through Azure AD, auto-enroll in Intune, and then the client. So coming back to our console to show you where we're at kind of today, if we look under our cloud services, so what we've got from the Cloud Management Gateway video, we've already set up our Azure AD. We've already set up our Azure subscription, and then we've already set up our Cloud Management Gateway to manage clients over the internet. So this is all covered in that video. You're going to want to start there if you want to set up this first scenario. So now that we have CMG set up, we're actually at a point where we can go ahead and come into our co-management node and go ahead and configure that. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. We're going to log in with our Azure AD Global Admin for our tenant. So I'll go ahead and enter my credentials in here. This setup is the whole just 4 clicks thing. This is when we're actually setting up the subscription, but of course there are things that we had to do before that, like set up CMG and a few other things. Now for this lab, I'm going to go ahead and choose to enroll all. Now this is important. So this is the command line that we need to upload into Intune as an application for the MDM agent out on the internet to know how to enroll back to our site through Cloud Management Gateway over the internet. So I'll go ahead and choose this copy option here. And just in case I end up copying something else, we'll go ahead and paste that into Notepad. So this looks good. Now this is the workload. So this is where when there are things that can be done by both Intune and Config Manager, whether you want to have them handled by ConfigMan or Intune. Now, for pretty much everything we're doing here, I'll say for this demo, we'll go ahead and put the compliance policies to Intune. But of course, you're going to get some of those native actions like device wipes, single sign-on when we register to Azure, and just a few other things you're going to get. But this is where there are things that can be handled by both, whether you want to offload those to Intune or just have them handled through ConfigMan. So I think this is fine for what we're doing today. For the staging, I'm not worried about this, but if you wanted to stage this out to maybe only have like some test collections, like some pilot collections, enroll here, that's where you can choose your pilot collection, and then you could have chose just to enroll into the pilot group. But for this lab, I'm okay with just enabling that for everything. And then we are good to go here. So that looks good. So now that we have the co-management set up, we need to make sure that our devices that we enroll in Intune can auto come down and get the Config Manager agent. So coming over to my Intune portal, under the application, so client apps, we're going to go through here under apps and create a new app. Now we're going to choose the line of business app. And this is where we're going to point out to the config manager CCMSetup.msi file. So this is located in your installation directory, bin, and then i386. So this is different than the CCMSetup.exe. This is actually like a bootstrap MSI version that's going to connect back to your site over CMG to actually download the files that we need for client installation. So CCMSetup.msi within the i386 folder. So that's going to go ahead and upload. We'll do OK on that. Now for the configure, this is where we need our command line. So we'll go ahead and fill out some of this metadata. So Microsoft, config manager client bootstrap, that's fine. Command line argument. So this is the important part here. This is where we're adding in all the details that we copied when we went through and configured co-management. Now, I'll include the resources that kind of explain what each of these settings are, but basically this is pointing out to our CMG server, our CMG MP, our Azure resource that we added within the CMG demo, But this is all going to be covered within one of the resources I give. But what's nice is that if you have CMG set up before you go through the co-management, you can just copy all the settings that are relevant. So that looks good. I'll go ahead and copy the name and paste that for the description since that's a required field. And then we'll go ahead and add this application. So this is going to go ahead and upload that MSI. So this will just take a couple seconds. All right, so it looks like that's done. So we'll go ahead and go into that application and click on the assignments. And we're going to go ahead and say that this is a required installation, and we're going to deploy this to all users and all devices as required in the device context. So we'll go ahead and do OK on that. And then OK here, and then click Save. So at this point, we have our config manager, CCMSetup.msi. That's going to be deployed through the client when it gets enrolled into MDM through Azure AD Join. And then it's going to enroll into our config manager site. And we'll go through and look what that process looks like. All right, so that looks good. So let's go over to one of our devices that are running Windows 10 1809. This is just in the out-of-the-box experience. Now, this is going to be where we go through and register this device with Azure AD. That's going to auto-enroll into Intune because we enabled those settings within Intune for auto-enrollment. So we'll go ahead and click Yes here. We will leave the defaults. Now, you can also use things like Windows Autopilot or a provisioning package where you can go through and really automate a lot of this general setup going through OOBE, where you only have to kind of connect to Wi-Fi and then it could all be automated to enroll for you. But just for the sake of this video, I think we're fine with just going through this process to get our device enrolled into Azure AD and then MDM, and then have the config manager agent auto deploy. Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. There we go. Okay, that's fine. All right, looks like I do have Windows Hello still configured within my environment. So we'll go ahead and get that done in the background. All right, so we are now Azure AD joined. Let's go ahead and take a look at our account. There we go. So if we look at this info tab, that means that we are also registered with MDM. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's just see if the CCMSetup.msi is actually kicked off yet on this device. Ah, looks like it has. So we can see we have the CCM setup folder. One interesting thing I will show you kind of what's going on when we install the config client. So we can see that's currently going through the install process. So let's just go ahead and verify that within config under our co-management that we don't have any devices currently co-managed. So we can see that we're at 0% here. So let's come back to our client and we can now see that CCM setup is installed. So that looks good. So, but I do want to show how the client actually downloaded. So here's our command line. There we go. So we can see that it copied all those details within the MSI parameter that we gave it. And what that's going to do is if we look at CCM setup, when it actually goes out, so since this is just a bootstrap install, it's actually going to go out to CMG for your Cloud DP and actually go out and download the content. So let's see if I can find that. All right, here we are. So since this is just the wrapper, the MSI wrapper, now we can see where it's actually going out and actually downloading the latest client through Cloud Management Gateway. So things like, your CCM setup, all the MSI files and different things associated with the client installation are all going to get downloaded over the internet to make sure that we have the latest version. So that's looking really good. So we can see that that process installed the client. To show some of the registration information about what actually happens when it registers through Azure within your config manager site, if we look at our logs and look at the client ID manager startup, so this is the log file that shows your client registering with your config manager site. What we're going to see here is, here we go. So we can see that since we're registered with Azure AD for your tenant, it's going to use that native cert that your client's going to automatically get with the Azure registration. So you don't have to worry about PKI for your client side, since that's all already going to be handled just through the default Azure join. So we can see that we went through. It registered with our site. It used Azure AD Auth, and we are now approved within our config manager environment. So this is now a managed client. We can see that we probably have started getting different policy for this device. So that's currently downloading. Okay, so it looks like we've gone through, it's got all the initial policy. So if we come through here and look at control panel, I'll go ahead and copy my config manager control panel applet to our desktop. And we can now see that this is a managed client. All right, so we are now co-managed as well. So that means we have Intune and config manager, but I'm also registered with my config manager site, and all that happened through Cloud Management Gateway over the internet. So this device is actually connected to one of my guest networks. So everything that we did today could be the same way, like if you had remote sites and you just wanted them to Azure AD Join, but you still wanted the config manager agent for the full capabilities there. So we'll just kick off. Looks like not every action has been enabled yet through policy, but this will happen over the next few minutes. Let's see if we have anything showing up here yet. There we go. So we now can see that we have one device out of the 7 that are compatible with co-management now showing that they are co-managed. So that's looking really good. So if we come back to our devices, let's just see what we have going on here. Okay. So this should be that device. So it's just going to have the generic name since we did everything directly out of the out-of-the-box experience. We can see that we are now co-managed. So that means the device is now in Intune as well as ConfigMan. So while we wait through that to go through the normal stages of registering and getting hardware inventory where we can actually go out and look at it, let's go ahead and talk about the other scenario. So the next one's going to be, what about for those devices on-prem if you wanted to also have them in a co-managed environment where you can get some of the MDM capabilities like conditional access, factory resets, things like that. That's a little bit more challenging. So I mean, with this first scenario, really the bigger requirement would have been getting Cloud Management Gateway set up, because then after that, it was really just making sure Intune is set to auto-enroll and MDM, and then making sure that you have your co-management setting configured in ConfigMan. So that really wasn't hard at all. This next scenario is going to be a little bit more, I would say, things that we have to make sure we have configured if you wanted your on-prem devices to register with a hybrid Azure AD and enroll into Intune for the co-management. So what we're going to do first to make sure that we have everything kind of configured and ready to go. This is a pretty vanilla lab. I thought this could be helpful for those of you who might not have Azure AD Connect configured on-prem. So that's going to be what we do next. In order to have our devices on-prem be able to auto-register with Azure AD, we need to make sure that we install AAD Connect. So I'm just going to go through the AAD Connect installation, and this is going to be a pretty standard. Many sites will probably already have this configured, but we'll go ahead and install that. I think the defaults here should be fine. Now, while we're waiting for that, I do want to show you what I currently have here. So if I go to the Office portal, I don't have any of my users currently configured within our on-prem site to sync into Azure AD. So for this next scenario, we need to make sure that we have that. So we can see we currently only have one user, and that's a cloud user that I created directly in here. So we're going to go ahead and sync some of our users as well as some of our devices so that we can go through this next scenario. Now, just a quick overview. So this is a prerequisite for getting our users to sync. We do need to make sure that we have our users with a public UPN. So what that means, if I open up my devices and look at one of my user accounts here, this is a on-prem user that I want to make sure that I can sync into Azure AD since I want to enroll this device into MDM, within this user. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that for your user account under your UPN that you're using the domain name that's associated with your tenant in Azure. So in my case, I'm using setupconfigmanager.com. So this domain's been around a while. I initially created it with this contoso.local domain name. So those type of identities wouldn't be able to sync. So what we can do is if you go into Active Directory Domains and Trust, you can go under your UPN suffixes, and then you would add whatever UPN is being used in Azure. So in mine, I verified my public domain name, setupconfigmanager.com, but you could always use your tenant name .onmicrosoft.com here as well. Once I did that, I went ahead and went into my users, and the one that I wanted to use for today, I went ahead and changed that UPN suffix. Now I'll include a few different resources. There are, of course, scripts that can go through and change this if you're using something that is not publicly verifiable within your lab domain name as well, where you can kind of automate this whole process. All right, so back to my Azure AD. What we're going to do here, so user sign in, we're going to use password hash. A lot of these will probably be default. This is going to be our global domain admin within our tenant. So this is my account for my setup config manager login. Right. There we go. All right. So this is the domain that we want to sync our on-prem users into Azure AD. So this is going to allow those on-prem devices as well as the users to have an identity out there that's going to be required in order to us to register our devices within Azure AD for on-prem. So this is going to be an on-prem enterprise admin account. There we go. So I added my on-prem domain. This is going to be where I want to sync. Now the next screen we can choose if we want to do any OUs. So I'm not going to sync everything here. For my test, I'm only going to sync a couple different OUs. So this is just letting us know that, hey, your on-prem domain is not resolvable. It's contoso.local. This is a few users that have been verified for your public domain name. It's just letting you know that you want to make sure that you have your users with that public domain name that's been verified within your account. So I've already done that. We've gone through and configured those accounts to do that. So we should be good here. All right, so this is where we can go through and select if we only want to sync specific OUs. Now, that's going to be the case in my environment. So if we look back at my structure here, I've got a few different things. I'm going to sync my users OU. So I've got this managed OU, and then I have users under that. Within here, we've got a couple of different users that we want to sync out to Azure AD that could be used to enroll devices. But then we need to choose what OUs that we want for computers to sync. So within this, I don't want all my computers to register with a hybrid Azure AD connection. I only want a couple. So within this, I have a demo OU. So this is going to be the on-prem device that is currently just managed via ConfigMan that I want to use to register with a hybrid Azure AD connection to enroll into Intune and then become co-managed. So I'm going to select my lab demo OU as well as my users OU, and that's going to be what I'm syncing for this test scenario. So that looks good. So if we look under managed, we're going to go ahead and get that demo OU, and then we're going to go ahead and I'll just leave it at the OU level. It looks like you can even get to devices, and then we'll go ahead and select the users OU. And we'll do next here. For this, I'm just going to leave the default options for identifying users. Synchronize, that looks good. So I don't think I'm worried about anything for pilot. I'll just leave it limited to the OUs that I did for the main sync. We'll do password write back as well. So if a user changes their password in Azure, it will write back to their on-prem account. Okay. So that's going to go ahead and install. And we will choose to run the initial sync. All right, so the initial Azure sync has completed. It took a couple minutes after it was complete. And now if we look back into our Office portal, we can see that we have a couple different things going on here. So this is the on-prem account that I synchronized. So we're going to go ahead and go into that. And what we need to make sure is that we assign it a license for that on-prem user that can be used for Intune. Otherwise, the device isn't going to auto-register into Intune when that user is signed in. So I've already got my Enterprise Mobility and Security E5 trial, and I've already assigned that to my user. So you will want to make sure that if your users weren't synced already, that you make sure that they get assigned a license that can be used for enrolling into Intune. So that looks good. Now, what we've done so far with Azure AD Connect is that we've just started synchronizing some of the identities, but we didn't actually configure our devices to automatically register with a hybrid join to Azure AD, which means that they would register into Azure in addition to being on-prem domain joined, which would get you some of the single sign-on capabilities, as well as that feature to auto-enroll into MDM or Intune. Now, before I go through and show you what setting you need to enable for that auto registration, we do want to make sure we set a group policy to tell the device when it registers with a hybrid Azure AD join that we also have it automatically register within MDM or Intune. So I'll include a link to this, but this has been available since 1709 of Windows 10. There's a group policy that can be configured to have it auto-enroll into MDM. So that policy, I'll go through and actually do what they're doing in the demo, which is setting it on a local policy since we only want to do this on one device. You could, of course, do this through GPO as well. But under the admin templates, Windows Components MDM, this is where we set the policy to auto-enroll into MDM when the device is registered into Hybrid Azure AD. So let me go ahead and do that before I actually configure our devices to register. So we'll go ahead and open up gpedit.msc, so just the local policy on this one device that was in that test OU that we want to auto-register. So under admin templates, Windows Components, MDM, and the option to enable automatic MDM enrollment using default Azure AD credentials. So we'll go ahead and do apply on that. So that should tell the device if it registers with Azure AD that it should also auto-enroll into MDM. So that looks good. It was set locally. Probably don't need to do a GP update, but just to be safe, I'll do a GP update and then also reboot. This shouldn't be required, but just to make sure that we have everything good and going faster for this lab, we'll go ahead and initiate that. All right, now what we can do to see if the machine is currently joined to Azure AD, which it shouldn't be because we haven't configured the enrollment through AD Connect yet, there's this command line that we can run, and I'll include a link to this article. So if we come back to our device and go ahead and run that, let me zoom in on that. It's dsregcmd/status. So that's going to tell you if the device is registered with Azure AD or not. So that looks good here. So actually that's interesting. It looks like it might, let's see. Looks like it has actually registered. Let me just go back into Azure AD Connect because this might have saved the setting from my previous installation. So if I come back into Azure AD Connect, because I did uninstall this for this video, but let me just see if it retained the settings. So once you install this, if you click on Configure, and then there's this option here to configure device options. There we go. So next here, let me just connect into my Azure AD tenant. Okay, so yeah, I think this setting did retain. If it was your first time setting this up, based on my experience, the option to configure Hybrid Azure AD Join was not available during the initial configuration when you install it. You would have to go back into like what I'm doing here to actually enable the Hybrid Azure AD Join. So what that setting does is for your on-prem domain join devices, it will also have them automatically be registered into Azure AD as well. So let me just click next here. it looks like it was already kind of set up here. So let me just go through and add this again to show you what it would look like. So we'll go ahead and add our domain. This is also a enterprise admin for your local domain, but it must have had these settings retained for me. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do next here. And this is where we're going to select that we want to auto-enroll Windows 10 devices or later. That's going to auto-register those on-prem domain join devices with Azure AD. So you get things like single sign-on for the Azure AD apps, as well as auto-registering into MDM since we enabled that local policy on the device. All right, so now we're complete. I think this was already configured, like I said, because when we looked at our on-prem device here, when we ran that command, we could see that it actually did, in fact, auto-register. And when I previously did that, it must have retained that configuration when I reinstalled Azure AD Connect. All right, so let's just take a look. If we come back into our accounts here, work and school. So it looks like it has registered into MDM, it looks like, because we can see this info tab. If it was just a Azure AD registration, we would just see the disconnect option here. So since we're actually on-prem actually, so we're contosa.local, that's if you wanted to disconnect to the domain. But this info tab is what means that we're also in MDM. So if we go ahead and look at that, we can see that it is registered. So let's just go ahead and force a sync here. If we look under our management server, we can see that it's Intune. If we look at our task scheduler, we should see under Windows Enterprise Management that we have some of the MDM scheduled tasks that should be registered. This should come in here in a second. There we go. So we can see all the different MDM tasks are created. So we're definitely registered. Now to actually validate that, I did open this before that registration occurred. So we can see that co-management is currently 1. That means that we're not co-managed. We can see that it's disabled here. So let's just see if this setting's actually taken effect yet. There we go. So reopening the control panel applet, we can see that we are now co-managed. If we go ahead and run a few actions here, I have noticed, I think it's the data discovery cycle that will actually send that we're now co-managed back to the site. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick that one off as well as hardware inventory. So that should hopefully have the site update a little faster so we can see that we now have 2 devices that are co-managed. So this is looking good. Now let's go back to Intune while we wait for this. So if we look back under here, let's go back to Intune, look at devices, all devices. All right, so now we can see both devices showing up here, and I just did something to hide that. Let's see. There we go. So we can see that we have the device that we enrolled through Azure AD only, and that automatically got enrolled into ConfigMan through our CCMSetup.msi that we created and deployed. And then we also have this on-prem domain join device that was automatically enrolled into Intune when we configured the Hybrid Azure AD Join through AD Connect. So this one is also now available via Intune, and we can see that they're both co-managed here. So that looks good. Let's come back to our console now. Let's go under monitoring, and now we can see that we have 28% for the co-managed devices. So that's now at 2. Let me just see if I can get that. There we go. So we can also see that the co-managed status, we can see that we have 1 device that was done via a Hybrid Azure AD Join. So that's the on-prem device that was registered with Azure AD and auto-enrolled into MDM, even though it's still a on-prem domain join device. And then we can see that we have 1 device that is purely Azure AD joined out on the cloud only. So we can see that we have that. We have those 2 devices. So this looks really good. We can also see the workloads that you define. So we have compliance policies set to Intune. Everything else is using ConfigMan. All right, so let's come back to our Azure AD Join device that is purely out on the internet. So what we can see here, so let's look at that. Looks like we just had some software updates applied. So now that this device is really managed via ConfigMan or Intune, you could of course do things like deploy apps. You would get all your normal hardware inventory, deploy packages, deploy your software updates. Now if we come back here, we probably will already have hardware inventory. So if we look at this device that is here, we'll go ahead and start Resource Explorer. So we can see it's got all the hardware inventory that you would expect to see with a full client. So that looks awesome. Let me just refresh this and we'll see. Oh, looks like it's already refreshed. So we can also see that this device that is on-prem also is now co-managed. But we can see that if we refresh, it's only that one Windows 10 device, because when we configured AD Connect, we only configured that one OU. So that can be a good way to kind of only sync the devices and register the ones that you want to use. So, I mean, at this point, we are pretty much done. So you could go through and you could, if you wanted to play around with the different workloads, you could, of course, come through and say, maybe I want Intune to manage device configurations, etc. And then you could start playing around with the Intune console if you wanted to have any of your workloads go out to MDM as well. But to show you some of those MDM capabilities, what we will do is we'll click our device. This is the one that was Azure AD Joined Only, not on-prem. And let's go ahead and perform a wipe. So we're going to do a full wipe here. And let's come back to this device real quick. So here's the device we initiated it on. So within the next few seconds, hopefully, we should see the device start to reset. There we go. So at that point, it's going to go through the system reset. So that looks good. So now it's resetting. And so that was the Azure AD Join device only. Now let's go ahead and come back here. So here's our other device. This is the one that was domain joined, but it was also registered and auto-enrolled into MDM through Azure AD Hybrid. So let's go back into our Intune console and let's see if we can go back to devices, and let's see if we can go ahead and send the wipe command here. There we go. So this one is on-prem. Let's see what happens with this. All right, so that one just kicked off. Since I was remoted in, I just lost the connection, but let's see if I can show you that device. That was V2 Win10. And now we can see that it's also in the resetting. All right, so I think that's all I had to cover, at least for the initial setup of co-management. Maybe we'll go through a few different things in the future around managing devices with Intune. So, I mean, that's all I had. So I think it does bring in some interesting scenarios. For me, I thought it was kind of interesting. Like if you have devices that are managed on the internet, maybe you have a lot of retail stores. If you had the ability to do everything you need through Azure AD, where you could have your devices and users auto-enroll themselves through the out-of-the-box experience with their normal credentials, and then auto have the config manager agent go through CMG. I think that that's an interesting scenario, as well as the on-prem way as well. So, I mean, that's kind of what I had. Hopefully that provides you value, and thank you for watching.